Thanks for tuning in today. I'm Dr. Nick, the Incrementalist. Join me as I seek out the small incremental changes being applied in other industries that we can learn from and that can be applied in healthcare. Can these changes bring immediate value, but also add up to the big improvements and revolution we need in healthcare? Come along with me to explore the possibilities. My innovative guests from around the globe have used small incremental improvements to achieve their moonshot.
And today, I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Rachael Grimaldi. She's an anaesthetist out of the UK who's set up a new company. Rachael, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Nick. It's an honor to be joining you from the other side of the ocean.
Well, let's start off. People will quickly gather from your accent that you hail from a different shore, the other side of the pond. We might confuse people with similar accents. And I've got to be honest, it's always fun to talk to you because I get lots of memories talking through some of my experiences back there. But if you would share a little bit of your background and your journey. You're an anaesthetist. I'll translate anesthesiology.
Yeah, absolutely. So from kind of more of my personal background, I actually lived in the States when I was younger. I was born in the UK, moved to the States when I was 8 and lived there for 8 years, went to school there, and then moved back to the UK again. And then I went to medical school in the UK. And as you said, I'm now an anesthesiologist and have been for the last, qualified 12 years ago, been practicing anesthetics for the last 10 years. And my kind of other hats I'm the Associate Medical Director for the Brighton Marathon, and I lead the research group and integration of ECMO, which is a sort of heart and lung bypass, into our advanced cardiac arrest team, and then founded CardMedic last year.
Interesting. So 12 years, so that's the sort of 2-year, I think they call it foundational now. It was, house dogs as in my era, and it was only a year to be clear, so I feel lucky in that sense. But you started to do some other things. So despite what I would consider a pretty significant progress and career towards anesthetics, I think you have a specialist area that you're looking to get into. You're doing a little bit more than that, right?
Yeah. So yes. So in terms of anesthetics, I really love pediatric anesthetics. So I've done some training. I've been to the Evelina London Children's Hospital. I did 6 months pediatric intensive care, and I'm going to Great Ormond Street Hospital in February next year to do my advanced pediatric anesthetics. And after which time I'll finally be a consultant or attending in American language. And last year founded CardMedic, which I never had any ambition or intention to run a business, feel very much like an accidental entrepreneur in that way, but co-founded CardMedic with my husband actually at the time when we were visiting family in America, and we've kind of built it out from there. So he's the COO and I'm the CEO, and it's been definitely a wild ride and a bit of a journey going from a clinician to becoming, a businesswoman or a clinical entrepreneur, to kind of bridge that gap.
So there's a couple of things to unpack there. First of all, working with your spouse, that's got to present at least some challenges, although maybe not. I'm interested to hear about that. And but more importantly, what is CardMedic and how did you arrive at that? What was the story?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'll go into CardMedic first, and then I will very happily chat about working with Tim. So yeah, CardMedic is essentially a communication tool. It's a website and app, software as a service, that improves communication between healthcare staff and patients across any barrier. So that could be a language barrier, visual impairments, hearing impairments, learning disabilities, or a range of cognitive impairment, or literacy issues. So in the States, that impacts nearly 50% of the population. And in the UK, it's 35% of the population. It's essentially a library, an A to Z library of pre-written scripts that replicate clinical conversations around common healthcare topics. And the member of staff can choose the script and show it to the patient to guide the clinical interaction. And then it can be flexed at the point of care to different languages, presented as sign language videos, or easy read with pictures or read aloud. And then we also have an integrated speech-to-text translation tool as well. It's accessible from any device. We're building it to integrate into electronic patient records. And really excitingly, nothing like it exists before. So yeah, it's been a journey developing that. And then kind of setting it up with Tim, we come from very different backgrounds. We've been together 20 years. I've kind of absorbed some business knowledge and skills from him, and he's absorbed a bit of medicine from me. But in my background is obviously very much medicine. His is building a global e-commerce company, background as well in graphic design and things like that. So he was able to build the website and do some of the branding and things while I wrote the content at the start. So yeah, like you said, obviously working with your spouse is definitely an interesting one. We're really enjoying it. I think, probably the biggest challenge really is just lack of time to spend with each other, which seems ironic when we're working together, but we're almost so siloed because it's so busy, and we're both working flat out all the time. And we've got 3 young children under 5.5. So between juggling business, I'm still working clinically, and the children, there's just no time left for each other. I think that's probably the hardest thing, to be honest.
So I gotta say it. I mean, I feel like there's a super suit somewhere in your life, because I can't even imagine all of those things playing in. But you clearly love it. You clearly enjoy it. Was there a point in time where you said, "Gosh, I see CardMedic," as it's called now? What was the triggering event? Did you see something? Was it associated with the recent pandemic, or was there more to it than that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, underpinning it all, I've had an interest over the last decade plus in communication in healthcare, patient safety, and human factors. That's always been really important. I've done a lot of work around that over the last decade. But actually, that wasn't the trigger for CardMedic. I hadn't thought of it. But when I was on maternity leave last year, visiting family in the States, and COVID struck in that first wave, we couldn't get home. I had at the time, my children were 5 months old, 2 years and 3 years, but I would have gone back to work if I'd have been in the UK. But as it stood, I couldn't get home. Our flights were cancelled 7 times, and we ended up in the States for nearly 6 months. But I was really desperate to help. Being an anesthesiologist, my skills were definitely relevant for the pandemic. But I was essentially just obsessively watching the news, and read an article about a patient who'd been to the ICU with COVID and was terrified because he couldn't understand healthcare staff through the PPE barrier. So I thought, what are people doing? Are they writing notes on paper, and how are they communicating? What if I put those notes on a website, an A to Z list, and then staff could choose the note, essentially the flashcard, if you like, and show it to the patient to guide the interaction? And that's very much where it started. And that was the idea for it. I genuinely did it to help some friends. I really never thought it would get to this point. I never thought I'd be running a business. And what happened actually within those it was concept to launch in 72 hours. So I wrote the content, Tim built the website, and then we launched and shared it with friends. But then in those the first 24 hours, I was encouraged to join Twitter, which I sort of was a bit skeptical about. I wasn't, not been on Twitter before. I'm not really on social media, but I did. And actually within those first 3 weeks, we had 8,000 users in 50 countries. And then we got some media coverage, and it kind of went a bit crazy from there. But through that organic growth, actually the feedback we got was that there are so many long-standing barriers to good communication in healthcare, stuff that we know from practicing on the front line anyway. Almost daily you're encountering patients with language barriers, or who are deaf or blind, or have a learning disability, for example, or literacy issues. And although there are services to support them, actually there are massive gaps in service provision, and it's not possible to always have a translator when you need it, or a speech and language pathologist, or a learning disability nurse. And so people rely on friends, family, or staff to translate, or children, or Google Translate, for example. So actually the feedback we got was, this is such a useful tool, and please can we have this to stay after the pandemic? And so it was kind of very much like, that realization of, yeah, actually, no, that's right. We do struggle normally. and how can I make this into a helpful tool going forwards? So it was kind of, although inspired by the barrier created by PPE, which created this kind of global crisis in communication in the pandemic, actually it just shone a light on the massive health inequities faced by those patient groups who have communication needs, and it's kind of, the rest is history almost from there.
Once again, the COVID amplified inequities. It amplified challenges that existed throughout. And once again, a silver lining, and I'm always pause when I say this when we talk about the pandemic, because it's had such terrible impacts around the world. But, this is another silver lining where we've started to address it. I can truly relate to being sat on the sideline. I mean, I'm nowhere near as qualified as you, but I have equal levels of frustration because your license is essentially worthless in the United States because you don't have US licensure. I couldn't even take tests. I couldn't do PCR testing, sticking a swab up somebody's nose because I didn't have a license to do that. So I was unable to sort of sit in, but I didn't have quite the insight. As you develop this, so clearly it took off. I mean, I think as you develop things that people go, wow, that makes sense, it's useful. What sort of change? Where did you see the tipping point to this is no longer just a side hustle, which it sounds like it still is relative to your anesthetics and career and all these other things. But where was the point that you go, that this is actually a business, and not just because it's a business, but because people need it, which is where you're coming at?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it kind of, it felt in the beginning a bit like a speeding bullet train. I sort of created something to help friends. It just kind of spiraled, and I suddenly thought, I just need to grab stuff left, right, and center to try and stabilize it all. And then at that 3-week mark, when we got the media coverage and we had feedback coming in from all over the world, I mean, it was TV, radio, and then ended up kind of webinars and podcasts and all sorts. And in the last year, we've had 50,000 users in 120 countries, a lot in the States actually, and 22,000 app downloads. And actually on that journey, it kind of was. So yeah, I think that tipping point essentially came when we were getting all that feedback and people were saying, this is a really useful tool. We really need this after the pandemic. And I kind of thought, wow, I can see how busy I've been. I can see that I'm working 24, 48, 72 hours straight, almost without sleeping. And this is really relentless. I have a decision, a bit of a tipping point. I have a decision to make. Is this something that I want to pursue? I'm on maternity leave. I was meant to be on vacation. And suddenly here I find myself in a global pandemic, as did everybody else, obviously, that kind of impacted us very much personally on a family level as well, trying to juggle all of that and the children, and thinking, right, well, I now feel like I have a responsibility to my friends, colleagues, peers, healthcare professionals, allied healthcare professionals at home and across the world and for patients who are kind of asking for this. Do I go down this path and pursue this route of trying to create something that's sustainable? Or do I say, do you know what, this is just too much. I didn't kind of plan for any of this. But my personality being what it is, I don't kind of shy away from a challenge. And I also felt like it was, there were kind of, I believe in signs, and kind of there are a few signs. And I thought, this feels like maybe it's meant to be. Like you talked a little bit about silver linings. There definitely is obviously a lot of awful things that have happened as a result of COVID. But, if this is something good to come out of it, then also that felt like it wasn't something I could just walk away from. So I think there was a lot. I then applied for some innovation. So from the UK government, Innovate UK grant funding. And I thought, right, well, if we get the Innovate UK grant funding, because, without proper funding, I can't really do anything with this. I can only get so far because it was all completely free for users. So it was kind of like, okay, well, if I get the Innovate UK funding, then that's a sign and we have to do it. And we got the Innovate UK grant. And I thought, right, okay, well, that, I said that was going to be my point, and we got that quite early on last July. So we kind of, that was it, a bit of a flag in the sand where we thought, okay, we definitely need to commit to this. And we also had so many people volunteering and helping us as well, who were still part of the team, that I couldn't bear the thought of letting anyone down. And so I guess that was kind of the tipping point. And then that sort of aligning with our vision of wanting to better humanity as well, globally, that's been very much a driver for this.
So for those of you just joining, I'm Dr. Nick, the Incrementalist. Today I'm talking to Dr. Rachael Grimaldi. She is the founder and CEO of CardMedic. She's also an anaesthetist, spans the pond, found herself in this extraordinary circumstance of being frustrated on the bench as a very experienced clinician who couldn't contribute because she was in the wrong country, founded a company that essentially solved not only a local problem to the pandemic and a communications issue, but essentially exposed the significant challenges that we experience in medicine from a communication standpoint, and formed a company. Oh, and by the way, she was on maternity leave. So, my superhero reference comes out again as I keep, interacting with you and learning more about what you did and the timing of this. So you were just talking about the journey, that inflection point. This became a real business. It sounds like the grant funding, and I want to be sure that I understand this. I'm going to use the term free money, and by that I mean you didn't have to pay it back. Was that true? Do you think that was a critical aspect to this in terms of making it happen? Because at some point, these are unsustainable activities relative to doing other things, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think you're exactly right. In terms of grant funding, so sometimes you get match funding where you have to put in 50% or 25%, whatever it might be. But this was 100% equity-free innovation grant funding from the UK government. So you have to spend the money, and you have to spend it within a certain time frame. For us, that was 6 months. And then, of course, you have to report back and everything. So yeah, I think that was definitely the kind of the fact that we were given that grant money, and we felt like it's going towards a really good cause, and we have to spend it. And that in itself, like you said, is unsustainable, doing these things without some kind of funding. And we need to be able to generate revenue, because we need to build a product that people are now asking for. And so the whole thing kind of sort of fed into itself, where we thought, right, well, we also have a commitment to the UK government to kind of honour their grant funding, which they've been so generous to give to us. So I think all of those things kind of came together to mean that we, that it kind of pushed us along that path of this needs to be a business. We need to be able to create this to be a business. But actually, what's really important to us is the social impact side of what we can do at CardMedic, and that this very much feels like tech for good. So whilst we want the business side to be very successful, we've had some, obviously we got 2 grants in the end, both from Innovate UK and some angel investment. We really want to support the CardMedic Foundation, which helps. We want to be able to fund community health workers for refugee camps, subsidize CardMedic's use abroad in developing countries, support humanitarian crises and female entrepreneurs or healthcare entrepreneurs in developing countries. And so I think having that kind of mission and passion to help staff and patients in the UK, the US and beyond, but also to help in developing countries improve health equity globally and health literacy globally, has meant that it's drawn together a really passionate and driven group of people to help make this happen. So I think it's been a whole combination of an amazing team that have come together, some funding as well, and I think just a common drive to better humanity.
So, clearly on a trajectory. I think you've had some good news, positive, feedback, and actually clients. This has to be a economically viable enterprise. You can't just continue to give it away for free. We see lots of examples of that being essentially a failure in the long term, because if it's unsustainable, it won't sort of persist. So you're trying to address that while still addressing the tech for good, as you describe it. You're a technophobe, not somebody that, and that's a little bit unusual for anesthetics, I would say, because they tend to be, the gadget people that, have all sorts of things going on. But, I think you would self-describe that way.
Mm.
As you look back to that time and, this journey, which is relatively short, is there anything that you wish you'd known that you've learned along the way as part of the sort of experiences that you go, wow, that would have made a big difference if I'd known or understood that at the time?
Oh, wow. That's such a good question. I think in a way it's really good that I didn't know the amount that's involved in running a business. I mean, Tim's always run businesses. He's very experienced and, has run multi-million-dollar global businesses. So I've very much seen him. My mum's run businesses, my brother runs businesses. So I've very much seen and lived the life of an entrepreneur and never wanted it. So I think in a way if I'd have known exactly what was in store thus far, I probably would have said, no way, Jose, am I kind of going down this route. I think if I'd have known that, we'd get to this point so quickly, it would have just provided me with a little bit of reassurance when you're kind of slogging away in those early days thinking, we've just signed a 5-year contract with the Beacon site and a large trust in the UK, which is amazing to have got from where we were to where we are in 18 months. And I've got lots of proposals across the UK and working with a couple of hospitals in the US as well now. And I think just having, I remember saying to Tim yesterday, I was like, I just want to know how this is all going to go in the next 5 years. You just want a bit of a crystal ball, someone to kind of look back and say, it's going to be okay. It's going to be all right. You'll make a success of it, or you'll get to where you want to be, or your vision will be realized. I think, I think that would be really nice for me to have that knowledge now. I think a year ago, it would be really nice if someone said, you'll do these accelerators. I've done 2 in Oxford. I've done a US Maths Challenge accelerator. We're currently on at the moment, a NHS clinical entrepreneur program. If someone had said, look, you'll do these, you'll get the skills. You don't need to keep feeling like an imposter forever, which is definitely a thing, imposter syndrome. I think it's just the reassurance of you'll figure it out. It'll be okay. You'll get there. And yeah, I mean, definitely being a technophobe, there's lots of gadgets and gizmos that I love in anesthetics, but I'm definitely not the first person to kind of, download a new app or something, just to really be like at the forefront of adopting new technology. I'm just, I'd sometimes much rather a pen and paper, which has kind of been ironic for pursuing this path. But I think the great thing is that I've been surrounded by people who do know about these things. And I'm very, very willing and open to say, do you know what? I have no idea about this area. I'll learn a bit, but I know what I don't know what I don't know. I know what I don't know. And I just want to surround myself with people who do know about those things. And I want to learn from them because there's absolutely no way that I can do it all. So I think that's hopefully maybe been a strength in kind of building out a passionate team that I've made sure I've surrounded myself with amazing mentors and really good people who understand this space like the back of their hand.
So if I was to pick out some things there, I think having the right additional experience, the business experience that plays too. And, if you've got the business experience, I would say having the clinical experience, because that obviously played, that was where you brought in, surrounding yourself and also being open to not recognizing or not knowing all of the answers, which, I think we many of us struggle with. So, for me, those are sort of key elements. In the remaining time that we've got, tell us what you're excited about, what's coming up and where you think this is going. And
yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. Well, we've got a couple of awards we've been shortlisted for, which we're really excited about coming up with Maths Challenge finalists as well in the US. And I just won the UK finals of She Loves Tech, and we've got the global semi-finals coming up in Singapore later this month or next month. So I've got kind of lots of exciting things on that front. And then with CardMedic itself, building out our EPR integration, I'm really excited about, and doing our kind of continuing on our journey with our sales and moving into the US as well next year, and working with hospitals in the US currently to kind of continue along that journey. So yeah, loads to do and lots of exciting things, and growing our team really, and kind of continuing our mission.
Fantastic. Yes. So just quick translation, EPR, EMR, EHR, it's just because that's not always well-recognized term, certainly over here. I think great times. There's a part of me that says that, the contribution of two sides of the pond helped you as part of this, that, gave you the personality that allowed to persist and, not knowing what was going on in the future, I think, or what it contained as activity, and then bringing together folks into this amazing team. Unfortunately, as usual, we've run out of time, so it just remains for me to thank you for joining me on the show. Rachael, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm really, really honoured to be a guest.
Thanks for joining me today. Do you have any better ideas, or have you found a small incremental change that's brought about a big improvement in your world? Let's continue the conversation on our hashtag, The Incrementalist, or share with me at DrNick1 on Twitter. You can find more information about the show on our program page at healthcarenowradio.com. And tune in next time to hear my discussions with leaders and innovators from around the globe who've revolutionized their space by using small incremental improvements to achieve their moonshot. I'm Dr. Nick, the Incrementalist, and I'm starting a revolution through evolution.